Morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. You are all most welcome to this second CIPSH, International Academy on Chinese Cultures and Global Humanities seminar. As Emilia said, my name is Torbjörn Lodén, and I'm the head of the Stockholm China Center at the Institute for Security and Development Policy in Stockholm. Our institute is proud to host this seminar for the CIPSH Academy and for the UAI, the Union Académique Internationale, or in English, the International Union of Academies. I wish to take this opportunity to express my appreciation and gratitude to CIPSH and to the Academy on Chinese Cultures and Humanities, as well as to the UAI, for making the seminar possible. Ideally, we should, of course, have met physically here today for this seminar, but because of the pandemic, we have chosen to hold it online. As most of you would know, the first CIPSH International Academy on Chinese Cultures and Global Humanities seminar took place in November last year. The topic was then Chinese and European resources for a global ethic. The papers from that seminar should be out in a digital version by now, but I'm afraid that difficulties have turned up at the last moment. Well, there have been difficulties all along the way, really. But now at the last moment, there have been some minor additional difficulties, so that the publication is a little bit further delayed. However, the editor of Diogenes assured me as late as last night that the papers are already in the hands of the publisher, duly edited at the journal. All references and other editorial details have been cross-checked, and they have been sent for production. So I think that we can now really look forward to seeing this publication digitally very soon. And sometime after that, the paper issue of Diogenes with our papers will also come out. For today's and tomorrow's seminar, we have chosen the topic Global Challenges and Global Ethics in a Time of Pandemic and Climate Change. It was my friend and colleague, Professor Göran Kolste, who came up with this topic. Göran is himself a distinguished scholar in the field of ethics, and I'm infinitely grateful to him for joining me in organizing this seminar. It is largely thanks to his efforts that we have managed to gather such eminently qualified participants for this two-day seminar. Eventually, we look forward to publishing the proceedings of this seminar as well. And we can discuss this further during the final discussion tomorrow, but tentatively, Göran and I have agreed to ask you to provide revised versions of your papers no later than March 1st next year. And of course, before publishing, we will also have to have your contributions peer-reviewed. With these short words of introduction and welcome, it is my honor to hand over the word to my friend and colleague, Professor Bingdun Xiong, who is the Secretary General of the CIPSH Academy on Chinese Cultures and Global Humanities. Please, Bingdun.
Yes, thank you. Dear colleagues, students and friends, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I am Xiong Bingzhen, the Secretary General of International Council of Philosophy and Human Sciences. Thank you very much for joining us for the second online webinar of the CIPSH Academy on Chinese Cultures and Global Humanities. I'd like to share a little story to begin, because some colleagues may be joining us the first time today. 3 years ago, the International Council for Philosophy and Human Sciences, CIPSH, decided to create an annual meeting of minds to broaden and deepen our understandings of the parameter, the substance, and much debated views on humanities that interest us. It's a proposition that had since been kindly agreed and generally supported by the Jiang Jingguo Foundation for International Scholarly Exchange. This initiative has since gained the attention and interest of our oldest member organization of CIPSH, namely the International Union of Academies, UAI. We thus have the great fortune to be led today by Professor Tobian Lawton and his partners to present to you now a second in a series of online exchanges. Professor Lawton just reminded us that when global pandemic prevented us to hold a in-presence academy as it was conceived last year on November 11 to 12th, the first CIPSH International Academy Seminar was organized on Chinese and European resources for a global ethic. If you combine that theme with our theme today and tomorrow, when we have the pleasure of bringing to you the second CIPSH Academy on this very gripping topic of global challenges and global ethics in a time of pandemics and climate change, we all realize that what our time had brought us, we're closer to really, what humanities now have to work together with all of our colleagues and for some serious needs that touches our daily life, regardless of where we are. This webinar, graciously hosted again by the Stockholm China Center at the Institute for Security and Development Policy. I really wish to be there. I want to visit that anytime I could. But that institute and center help us to understand that the reason for wanting to add and deliberate on these issues is really quite apparent to all. Namely, this pandemic confronts our world population with a surprise attack. But it continues, and not to say that the calamities resulted from human-induced climate change are so unavoidable and strong, clear by now to ordinary men, women, children, our fellow humanities around us. So the vision and the pledge behind this webinar is clear. At a fundamental level, it wants to answer to the constant cause for the humanities, the arts and letters, the field that we labor and love, to remain relevant to public concerns and societal needs. For these 2 days, we like to share the results of our labor and to show our commitments to make our contributions professionally in a loud and clear way as well. We will be presenting 6 different panels consisting of 13, more than a dozen research papers. And this time, we're joined by renowned scholars from such fields as epidemiology, public health, emergency care medicine, bioethics. That's in addition to our more normal fields in humanities and critical social sciences. If any of you were to look at the clocks, watch, or not just on your own wall, but on the watches that our speakers are wearing today and tomorrow, you would appreciate that CIPSH, together with our dear colleagues now, have indeed taken the personal and international institutional voices representing us as part of the global. We've embarked on a journey that is still very young and fresh, but it's rewarding. When the design of this CIPSH Academy was first conceived, we're all absorbed in the exuberance, enthusiasm, and high aspirations. None of us knew that we'll be visited by a pandemic that would separate us and that would not allow us to organize a physical gathering. Now, 2 years later and counting, I'm pleased, of course, on the one hand, that we continue to have your support to help us examine these important aspects of interface between Chinese cultures at large and global humanity issues. It is a testimony to our shared quest for human understandings, although on the other hand, we still can't see each other yet. So this meeting to me appeared to be even more valuable and precious. Please allow me to thank Professor Trobian Luden. I haven't even met him in person yet. And Professor Gordon Kostate, I hope to see you soon, and their assistants. And thank you all for your indispensable participation. When we can get together 2 days to try to find answers and share our studies, I know that we would have a successful conference. So I hope to be able to greet you in person and thank you all before too long. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bing-John, for your inspiring words. The world today is really facing very serious problems, and climate change and the pandemic certainly are two of the most serious problems, perhaps the two most serious problems. And just because the world finds itself in such a difficult situation, I think that international cooperation and cross-cultural communication, not least in the academic world, is more important than ever. And in that perspective, it's quite wonderful that the CIPSH has taken the initiative to establish an academy on Chinese cultures, an academy rooted in Taiwan and as well as in mainland China. I think this is very promising and inspiring for many of us, not least those of us who are engaged in Chinese studies outside of China. Now I think it's almost 9:30 and time to get going on our first session. So with great pleasure, I give the word to Göran Kolste, who will chair this first session. Please, Göran.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your nice words, Professor Chung, and the introduction by Professor Lodén. Yeah, it's really great to be present here and to be able to discuss these two major challenges to our future, in fact, and how we can in some way find common language, not least a common ethical language, to tackle them and to cooperate around these challenges. Yes, I will be chairing the first session, and the idea now is that we have introduction in the order of the program. Please keep the time limit for your presentation. You will be reminded of when you have a few minutes left during your presentation. You can have some, if needed, some questions for clarification, I think, immediately after presentation. If there's something that is not really clearly understood or something, you can have that kind of questions. But the discussion on the content of the two papers, although they are not always very much related, but anyway, they address similar problems. We have for half an hour after the, I think it's half an hour at least, after the two presentations, no, 20 minutes after the two presentations to be able to discuss the issue. And of course, even the presenters can raise some questions at that moment during the discussion that they want to have get feedback on. So I think that would be the form for this. As you can see also, we start with two papers which is more related to the problem of climate change, and then the other papers later will more address the question of the global pandemic. If you want to, yes, perhaps we should say that also, that you can raise your hands who are panelists here participating in the workshop. Those of you who are attendees can send questions in the Q and answer function, and we will then also pick up those questions. Geologist at the Institute Nazionale di Geofisica e Vulcanologia in Rome. I tried my best to pronounce it in Italian. It must be a fantastic place anyway. His field of interest covers engineering, geology, geoethics, and philosophy of geosciences. He is also an author of the book Geoetica, Geoethics. In English, it will also be translated, I think, into English. And he has written several articles and chapters on geoethics. And the title of his presentation is Geoethics as Global Ethics to Face Global Anthropogenic Changes. So please welcome you, Giuseppe Di Capua, to your presentation. And now we can see your slides very well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hello to everybody. And first of all, I wish to thank Torbjörn Loden and Goran Kolste for the kind invitation to contribute to this very important webinar. The goal of my presentation is to give you a picture about motivations and foundations of geoethics. And I want to start from an initial consideration that you can read in these slides and that I have used in the last presentation that I've given about geoethics. Geoethics initially developed in the context of geosciences or earth sciences as a rediscovery by geoscientists, or others prefer to say earth system scientists, as well as a real process of consciousness raising of the social role they can and should play in support of society in facing global anthropogenic changes. And this process, rediscovery and consciousness raising, led to create two fundamental documents for geoethics. The first one is the Geoethical Promise, and in these slides you can read the formula. And it's a Hippocratic-like oath for geoscientists, originally proposed in 2014, and this oath was introduced as an official declaration in the Italian University in 2018 during the geological degree ceremony. And the Geoethical Promise is part of another fundamental document, the Cape Town Statement on Geoethics, officially released in 2016 by the IPG, the International Association for Promoting Geoethics, at the 35th International Geological Congress in South Africa. This statement includes also a first list of geoethical values to orient professional behaviors. The Cape Town Statement is supported by 27 geoscience organizations, among the most important in the world. And moreover, the statement was also translated in 35 languages I invite you to visit the IPG website to download it. The great development of geoethics in the last 10 years is testified by numerous important books and also other 3 years in preparation, and by a huge number of events, initiatives, sessions organized by the IPG in cooperation with other geoscience organizations. In these slides, you can see the covers of the books published. The intra-professional dimension of geoethics is the bedrock on which we have developed and we are continuing to develop geoethics. Over the years, the theoretical framework of geoethics progressively developed, articulated, and enriched to the point that from a primarily professional ethics, so basically a deontology, it has expanded to include extra professional responsibilities towards society and the environment, until it becomes definable as an ethics of the human agent towards the Earth system. So initially we have studied and creating something related to ethical issues in the profession and the relationships between geoscience and society. And then we have started a reflection on the meaning that the geoethical thinking has for humans in general. And why this? In my and others' colleague opinion, the ecological crisis is triggered by a crisis of the human being. This crisis is not attributable to the anthropocentric vision of the human being, which we consider in part inevitable, but rather to its lack of responsibility towards the choices that affect its interaction with nature. In fact, humans build their niche, their sphere in the Earth system, shaping landscapes, modifying Earth processes, creating their physical and metaphysical networks and artifacts. And this is a legitimate choice by humans. They do this from at least 12,000 years, while the ecological crisis is something more recent related to the last 215 years, and in particular to the last 70 years. The niche building is a process driven by needs, expectations, idols, fears, principles, values, and feedback processes make changes continuous. We shape the Earth and the Earth shape us. And the ways in which we shape the Earth is a field of interest for geoethics. We make choices, we take decisions, and this is the focus of ethics. And since we are talking about shaping the Earth system, this is the focus of geoethics. Geoethics considers the relationship between the human beings and the Earth system as a specific object of an analysis capable of defining the best ways of implementing these relationships in the light of shared principles and values that overcome the differences of the various social, ecological, and cultural contexts. Problems that have global impacts on societies, needs for shared solution by Earth human inhabitants. And on the one hand, we need to cultivate diversity to catch all the speculative and pragmatic opportunities offered by human intelligence. On the other hand, we need to share analysis, methods, and practices to reach common goals, such as living on the planet in a more responsible and sustainable ways. And the sharing implies to establish a dialogue, to create a common language, and to face the current ecological crisis. A solid scientific basis and the philosophical reference frameworks are needed to be proposed in very different human contexts. In this sense, geoethics should be considered an ethics for society, a global ethics for a globalized, strictly interconnected world, a global ethics of responsibility towards the Earth system, a common set of principles, values, methods, practices to face global anthropogenic changes. And in order for human interaction with the Earth system to take place in a responsible and forward-looking way, we have to take into account 2 fundamental concepts. The planetary boundaries, a set of 9 planetary processes within which humanity can continue to develop and thrive for generations to come. And crossing these boundaries increases the risk of generating large-scale, abrupt, or irreversible environmental changes. And the second concept is the social ecological systems, that is complex adaptive systems in which human communities are embedded in nature. Incorporating these 2 concepts into our ethical reflections reflections is necessary to reconfigure the human Earth system relationship on the basis of new perspectives and through the adoption of practices that are guided by renewed ethical criteria, new ethical principles and values. Faced with the technological development of the 20th century, the German philosopher Heinz Jonas had already placed at the center of his ethical proposal the principle of responsibility to guide humans in their technological development. And even in geoethics, we consider the principle of responsibility as the ethical criterion for action to ensure recognition and protection of the intrinsic value of any living and non-living element with which the human being relates on the planet. The principle of responsibility expresses the commitment to answer for our action and their consequences. Making responsible choices requires applying ethical principles in the search for a superior good, not only for the benefit of today's societies, but also considering the impact of humanity's choices on future generations, like the philosopher Jonas highlighted. And in this perspective, geosciences are a useful set of disciplines for navigating the complexity of modern times. Geoscience expertise is essential for the functioning of modern and future societies. Geosciences are useful to provide energy and materials to sustain and develop our civilization. Geoscientists have a crucial role for the defense against georisks, for achieving the sustainable development goals, but we should not forget that even geosciences have contributed to habitat degradation, loss of biodiversity, soil impoverishment, ocean acidification, anthropogenic global warming, and alteration of biogeochemical cycles. And in several cases, geoscientists have been also a means for those lobbies and powers that have strongly contributed to the ecological crisis. After this consideration, you can ask today, which is the societal role geoscientists play within society, and how much ethics is important in modern geosciences. These are only some of the fundamental questions that modern geoscientists, aware of the ethical and societal implications of their profession, should ask themselves. As any scientist, geoscientists have a responsibility in developing excellent science and international cooperation, as well as in communicating scientific knowledge to different stakeholders. And specifically, geoscientists have great responsibility in creating methods and technologies for assuring people's safety and the responsible use of planet Earth as entity of its georesources, to guarantee public welfare and sustainable life conditions for present and future generations. Geoscientists can favor a collective awareness also that is able to foster the development of global governance, which in turn is capable of facing environmental and health issues affecting the whole of humanity, regardless of political, social, economic, and cultural differences. And this is a great responsibility for geoscientists, a great responsibility for us. But pay attention to another important aspect. What I'm saying does not mean considering geoscientists custodians of the truth and of the correct vision for a better future. Rather, it means recalling them to the social duty of connecting scientific knowledge to the sense of value of society, to what is right, to what is wrong, to what is important. Moreover, we must consider that the complexity of the world and problems affecting the planet requires multidisciplinary approaches and transdisciplinary cooperation capable of synthesizing a range of knowledge, methods, and tools. And this is one of the goals of promoting a geoethical attitude. Geoethics aims to foster an analytical, critical, and scientifically based attitude towards issues concerning the relationship between human beings and the Earth system, defining cultural categories and behavioral values based on experience and scientific knowledge, which contribute to orienting human beings towards more responsible individual and social choices. Transferring this attitude to society, intending in all its components, so from political decision makers to legislators, to technicians, to the mass media, to citizens, means contributing to the promotion of responsible economic, technological, and social development based on political decisions that take into account their consequences on citizens, future generations, and the environment. After depicting this picture, now I think it's important to give the definition of geoethics. And this is the definition sum up some of those I have presented in my previous slides. Geoethics has been defined as research and reflection on the values which underpin appropriate behaviors and practices wherever human activities interact with the Earth system. Geoethics deals, and this is the first and more general part of the definition of geoethics. The second part is geoethics deals with the ethical, social, and cultural implication of geoscience knowledge, education, research, practice, and communication, and with the social role and responsibility of geoscientists. This definition outlines the perimeter of the geoethical analysis and action, underlying the need to preliminarily identify the values on which to base the choices that define the relationship between the human being and the Earth system, placing geosciences at the center of the issues, indispensable disciplines to understand the importance of that this relationship is shaped responsibly and sustainably. A wider and articulated definition of geoethics is provided by me and my colleague Silvia Peppoloni in 2019, while a scheme of the theoretical structure of geoethics is shown in this and the following slides from a paper Silvia and I have published in the last book on geoethics published by the Geological Society of London. This scheme contains the definition of geoethics, its fundamental characteristics, it provides its social perspective, it gives indication about the cultural ground of geoethics, and the scheme highlights the three main principles of geoethics: responsibility, dignity, and freedom. And its four domains of interaction: the self, the interpersonal domain, the societal domain, the environmental domain. And the scheme contains also the geoethical values for each of these domains and consequent actions to be developed by embracing those values, leading human beings to reach the awareness of being moral agents, so beings capable to consider ethical issues and to make ethical choices, to realize justice towards current and future generations as goals of directions, as well as to respect the geodiversity, biodiversity, and social ecological systems. These schemes, in our opinion, may become a proposal on which to base a new pedagogy for our societies based on geoscience knowledge. This is the scheme for developing geoethics as a project for putting in practice the geoethical thinking. We have two fundamental principles that are at the base of geoethics. I repeat them: dignity, freedom, and responsibility. Dignity is the recognition of the existential rights and values to anyone, including oneself, or to anything. And dignity presupposes the intention to respect oneself and others. Geoethical action is functional to recognize the right to existence for any entity and its values. Freedom is the existential condition of the human agents, thanks to which the individual is able to think, process, and choose through options without external constraints that limit the intellectual and operational faculties. And I already talked about the responsibility. These principles are applied to the four relational domains of human life, and several values are defined for each domain, bringing to act in order to aim at other three aspirational principles: awareness, justice, and respect. These are the goals of the geoethical actions: becoming more aware, becoming more just, becoming more respectful. But it is evident that if we don't preliminarily recognize and share into the human communities the three fundamental principles, in my opinion, it's impossible to create the conditions for the application of aspirational principles. In this table, you can see the scheme of the geoethical values refer to the four relational domains of human life. The principle of responsibilities guides the research of the values useful to reach the aspirational principles. If we refer to the self-domain, the responsibility is rooted into the individual ethics of each person, as well as when we refer to the interpersonal domain, the responsibility shapes the social and professional relationships. And in this second case, it brings to develop a code of ethics to assure professional ethics and research integrity. Both in the case of the self and the interpersonal domain, values that drive behaviors are the same: honesty, integrity, accuracy, and reliability, transparency, listening, and sharing. When we deal with the societal domain, responsibilities applied towards social stakeholders, and the values that drive behaviors are equity, inclusivity, cooperation, adaptation, prevention, sustainability, geoeducation, inter and multidisciplinarity. And finally, if we deal with the environmental domain, the principle of responsibility becomes ecological. The responsibilities towards the Earth system, stewardship, sustainability, impact minimization, protection, conservation, enhancement become the reference values to be respectful towards the Earth system. In this and the following slides, I sum up the main characteristics of geoethics. A distinguished feature of geoethics is that it is actor-centric, and in particular centered on informing the conceptual frameworks and practical interventions on the individual agent. Moreover, geoethics is based on geoscience knowledge. In complex societies, attitudes and ways of thinking have to be rooted also on the geoscience knowledge in order to find the most acceptable ways to interact with the Earth system. Geoethics is a virtue ethics, placing at the forefront individual responsible action based on the adoption of societal and professional principles and values. And finally, geoethics is context dependent in space and time. This means that it's shaped by a strong awareness of the environmental, economic, cultural, and political conditions and limits existing in different social ecological contexts. This implies that same problems may have different solutions or approaches in diverse countries. Geoethics is wide. Its interests are focused on different topics. Multidisciplinary, it has a cooperative, integrated, if possible, holistic approach to problems, also through the overcoming of sectoral language to reach the intersection and integration of knowledge. Synthetic expresses a position of synthesis between different existential concepts and the relationship between the human being and nature, which can be defined as ecological humanism. Global and local. Its issues of interest have both a local dimension of intervention and a global one that can be extended to the entirety of the Earth system. And pedagogical, the structure of geoethics is a model of cultivating one's own ethical dimension to achieve greater awareness of the value of human identity, not in terms of exercisable power, but of respect for the dignity of what exists. And political, geoethics criticizes the materialism, selfishness, and consumerism of capitalism, prefiguring a profound cultural change of economic paradigms, and advocates the right to knowledge as the foundation of society. Now it's probably clearer that the development of geoethics is at a turning point. The intraprofessional perspective of geoethics is narrow. Geoethical thinking has a big potential for being proposed to society, but this raises new considerations. After having strengthened the theoretical structure of geoethics and launched new initiatives aimed at favoring the spread of geoethical thinking, geoethics must deal with some issues concerning the social organizations of organization of dominant cultures, the existing economic structures, and the political systems that govern the world. So the development of geoethics is going beyond intra-professional boundaries by pushing to create new bridges between geoscientists and philosophers, social and political sciences, economists. And this can give additional geosocietal perspective to geosciences. And this can give to other disciplines insights to incorporate new reflections and proposals into their conceptual and practical frameworks and languages. All this can help geoethics to be proposed as a global ethics. For any kind of information about geoethics and initiatives by the IPG, I invite you to visit our website. To conclude, I wish to thank Silvia Peppoloni, the IPG Secretary General, who helped me in preparing this presentation. And in this final slide, there is my email. Don't hesitate to contact me for further information. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. It was a very interesting presentation of this new field, geoethics. So now we have some time for our questions. And according to the program, we should start 10:30, but I think we'll start a little later if we have a good discussion now. Sit in your interesting presentation, geoethics, more as a future-looking principle. We should be responsible for what we are doing now and for the consequences. There's also a historical back-looking principle of responsibility, which means that those who are responsible for the situation that we are in now. I think that has been one of my research interests on the last 20 years about this historical responsibility. And when I listened to George about his ideas about how India should change and try to face the climate changes, I cannot help thinking that these changes are caused by other people who have been industrializing themselves, developed their, or then I can say our very high standard of livings, which is now the cause of this problem. So who should be how can we apply the principle of responsibility in this way? As you know, the very important concept in the discussion on climate change is that polluter pays. Perhaps you can elaborate a little on this principle.
It's not only related to polluters. We have a debt as Western countries towards all the other countries of the world. So in my opinion, it's and we saw also this in the last G20 and the COP26. That's unfortunately there is no a real governance about Western countries and a real policy to help also other countries, not in the form of the past, obviously, as a sort of colonizations of also the ways in which other countries have to face problems, have to take their decisions, but to help also with for example, we have a lot of technological developments. We cannot share with the other countries only our ways of consumerist ways, like based on plastic, for example, because here we have an industry that can recycling plastic, but in the south of the world there is not this, and so we have to also to share with them in many ways our knowledge. This is our great responsibilities in order to go towards a planetary or terrestrial identity, like, for example, Edgar Morin says. This is our great responsibility. We have to take, we have not the savers of the planet, but in any case, the complexity of the globalized world now needs that from our part, we have to take something for the others, really to help and to co-create solutions. In fact, when I say that geoethics takes into account, look at the global problems of the, and this doesn't mean that we don't, we cannot work at the local level. We have to work at local level, co-creating with the other countries, our Western countries, with other countries, the solutions that are context-based. So based on their cultures, based on their societal organizations. And this is possible. We have a lot of examples, positive examples, for example, in South America, but also in Africa. There are a lot of great examples on this. So this is our great responsibility towards the entirety of the planet.
Thank you. Now it's some more minutes for anyone who want to raise. You can raise your chat hand here, or raise the hand, or you can write in the chat. Is there anyone who want to? Yes, I see that Kanakulia wants to raise a question here. So please, Nixon.
Thank you, Joran, for chairing this session. I just want to ask Giuseppe. I wanted to make some comments on the geoethics in regards to the natural resources, minerals, and all those conflicts and the issues that the world is facing. I don't know whether geoethics can contribute to that discussion to make that domain ethical. It's one of the causes of imbalances around the world. I don't know what you have to say about that.
So related to georesources, we have I think we talk about not sustainable development. We talk about responsible mining, for example, because in this way, our responsible use of georesources, because to this aim, at the IPG, we have also prepared a document about a white paper on responsible mining. This is a concept, for example, that is now also has been introduced in the mining sector, for example, and take into account also conflict minerals that come from conflict zones, and take into account also the possibility to involve local communities in the projects, and so there is a lot of initiatives on this, but we have to take into account one of the fundamental concepts that I put at the base of geoethics, that is planetary boundaries. We live on a finite planet in which resources are finite. And so we have to take into account this. In fact, this is the reason why, for which I say that geosciences have a crucial role in this, because geosciences can define the limit of resources on the planet, and we have to take into account this in order to use these resources. But this is a problem related to the amount of resources. The other pillar is the society and the relationship that we have with the local communities, that is fundamental in order to have a responsible management of georesources. There are a huge number of examples on this. So I think that the world changes in a better way. Obviously, we have to push this, and we don't look only to what is the bad example. We have also to look at the right example, the best example. We have to make them emerge from the shadows, because there are a lot of good examples.
Give us one example then.
Oh, for example, in Europe, we have now a laws that of the European Commissions related to the use of the minerals that comes from the conflict zones. Now Europe has a directive that's forbidden this, but this is not only to forbid the I don't know in English how to say the approvvigionamento, to take these minerals from these zones. It's not only a problem to forbid, but also to help those communities that are based on, for example, small scale mining or artisanal mining, to create conditions for legal frameworks that can help those people to continue to make their mining activities, but in a modern and more respectful ways for themselves and for the environment. The European Union is working on this. There are a lot of also of projects funded by the European Commission.
Good. Dixon, are you satisfied? Do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, I think we're good with good examples. We need hope in this discussion.
Goran,
yes.
Goran, it's possible the last comment about what I say about the responsibility towards other countries. I think that the patents of vaccines is emblematic on this. If we want to share, if we want to judge our level of responsibility towards the world, we have to look at the patents of vaccines.
I will. I promise you will hear more about that tomorrow. I don't say more now, but Torbjörn, you want to say something?
I don't know if we have the time. Should we perhaps proceed, Göran? I don't
Well,
have
if you just had a short question.
Okay. Well, a short question or a short comment. First of all, thanks for two really interesting, fascinating presentations, which make me make two reflections. First of all, the GDP as an indicator of level of development. Listening to you, I was reminded that that taking the GDP as almost the sole indicator of level of development should belong to the past. I'm sure you agree with that. But what should we do with the GDP? Does it have a role to play as some kind of indicator of positive development also? How do you look upon the GDP as an indicator of development? Secondly, listening to the discussion on the role of self-reliance.
I would say some short words on
just to say, GDP doesn't work. There are a lot of other indicators that have been proposed. Obviously, from the time of proposals to the time of that those proposals are taken into account passes several years. So, but we are all agreed that doesn't work, and part of the financial world now think that doesn't work. In fact, also in the financial world, there are initiatives in order to also to judge, for example, funds in other ways, and also take into account other parameters. So we have to discuss about if we can say if the capitalism is reformable or if we have to change this to another economic system. The discussion is open, obviously, and it takes several years.
Thank you, and thank you for these very nice presentations about this part of the conference dealing with climate change and what we can do about it, and the ethics that has to be developed in response to all the threats we can see. We have got two very interesting and nice presentations. Thank you very much. And now I will still also chair the next session. And now we turn over to the other, so the challenge that we face today, that is a pandemic, and different papers relating to the ethical implications of the global corona pandemic. And the first speaker is Dixon Kanakulia. Dixon is lecturer in philosophy and ethics at Makerere University in Uganda. He's been involved in several collaborative research projects on the East African region and has publications and research outputs in philosophy, ethics, governance, and sustainability. And he is also my PhD student, which I'm very proud of to say. Dixon, the title for Dixon's presentation is COVID-19 and the Ethics of Human Security within Asymmetric Sino-East African Relations. So please, Dixon.
Thank you. I'm trying to share my slides. I don't know whether they're visible now.
Yes, they are. And you can make it also, so it's just one slide showed. If you click down on the right, yes, fine.
That's okay.
That's okay. Very nice.
Okay, so once again, welcome everyone to this webinar. And I'm talking about the pandemic and the concept of human security in the China and East African relations. So I'm going to be going a bit fast. Time is not enough. So along the way, since there'll be time for discussion, you can raise some questions, because I think
you have the same time that you have from the beginning. So we just prolong the schedule a little. So don't think you have to hurry.
Okay. So let me start. I start with a quotation from Des Gaspar. I think many of you know him, one of the leading thinkers on ethics. He wrote a paper on human security, and he says that human security perspective promotes some necessary prerequisites for serious discussion on issues in global ethics. So I was reading his paper probably 1 year ago, and I remember this idea of human security, and that's what interested me in exploring it in this webinar, this seminar. So historically, in the East African region, for those of you, for those who don't know this region, in Africa, involves those countries you see there. They are been connected ethnically, culturally, and many other ways. And at the same time, we also had a relation with China. So since the Tang dynasties, many centuries ago, there was culture and trade relation between these two cultures. And in modern times, China signed many cooperation agreements with almost all these countries. So there's really been historically serious relationship within the East African region and China. But the outbreak of COVID-19 has highlighted challenges in international relations that has brought out ethical issues. So this paper tries to look at them from a human security perspective, especially within the framework of the East African relation. This is mainly because, as you all know, in the past 1 to 2 years, most of the developed countries or the global north and the rich countries, they acted out of self-interest, and this has impacted the human security of almost everyone around the world. So this is a meta-ethical analysis, trying to look at the ethical issues that emerge from the wider perspective. Now, to start off this discussion, we have to look at just 1 or 2 slides about the background that the healthcare systems we have in this part of the world have a colonial connotation. So this pandemic has exposed these colonial relations that have been there before. So they are leftovers of these colonial relations between the colonial powers and the former colonial powers and the colonized. Some scholars usually dismiss this and say, when shall we stop talking about colonialism? But it is a historical fact. It still affects many countries up to today. We cannot just wish it away. And we all know that the purpose of colonialism mainly was to exploit the colonies. It wasn't really for the benefit of the natives. So the current healthcare systems are neo-function expressions of these colonial leftovers. And the fear, and this is where this paper comes from, the fear is that the Sino-African nations may end up using the same structures that were there before, may end up relying on the same rails. And that's why we are trying to interrogate the ethical challenges that are emerging as a result of the outbreak of this pandemic. So we're trying to analyze the relation between China and the East African region, but trying to ensure that it doesn't end up following the colonial trajectory. And global ethics provides a context for us to evaluate these issues. And that is generally what ethics stands for. And the challenge that many or almost everyone wishes that there is a standard of behavior, global ethics in the world, but unfortunately, it doesn't exist, or at least not for now. And this because of the meta-ethical challenges that involve culture, power relations, politics, and many others, which we are going to be looking at. So the ethical or the value systems within which individuals and institutions behave, the ethical continuum within which they behave, are surrounded by political, economic, and other social cultural realities. And these end up affecting this within which they work. They end up affecting how individuals and the whole institution and the political systems operate. This is the continuum within which we are analyzing these relations. So the COVID-19, maybe say something about it. COVID-19 outbreak has impacted the region. The figures for so far, by yesterday when I last checked, I think by today, there are around 430,000 cases with over 8,000 deaths in the region, according to the tracker of the region. So this outbreak, although it has not led to so many fatalities in the region, but it has disrupted life in the region. Trade, culture, transport, many other things have been disrupted. And this is the reason why ethical issues emerge. So this is just a snapshot of the whole continent. So you can see generally, the East African region has also had some problem with COVID-19. So because the African economy have been integrated in the global economy, it has brought with it both advantages and disadvantages as the pandemic is concerned. So the outbreak has highlighted imbalances in East African relations. Trade between China and Africa increased by around 700% from the 1990s up to today. It has really grown very fast. And actually recently, they created the China-Africa Cooperation Platform in 2000 to try to guide this cooperation, this relation. But the COVID-19 outbreak has showed that there's an asymmetric relation which is imbalanced, and it has affected how the relation between these two regions, how they work together. Although it's not as bad as it may be with other regions in relation to Africa, but still needs some interrogation and improvement. So the context of human security is not the same as military security per se. So the problem or the issue with human security is that it involves many other aspects apart from the military aspect. And that's what COVID-19 has shown. Although when it broke out, many scholars or thinkers were calling it a war. Remember Trump, remember Macron and others. They say we're at war. Angela Merkel and others, they framed it in a language of war, that they're fighting, but the enemy is invisible. And therefore, the best way to analyze COVID-19 is using the human security perspective, because it's not simply going to pull out guns and bombs and fight the enemy, COVID-19. It requires a multifaceted approach. So this concept of human security is really necessary, or it's good to look at these ethical issues that emerge. This concept was mainly advanced by the Human Security Framework, the Human Development Report in the 1990s. They developed this human security development, one of the indicators of development, and it has 7 main aspects: the economic, food security, health, environmental security, personal, community, and political security. So COVID-19 has highlighted these aspects and the vulnerabilities that the region, South African region, has faced because of the pandemic in all these aspects. Because of time, we will not look at each of them in this paper, but you just select a few just to indicate what has taken place. So there's a strong relation between human security and ethics, because each of these aspects, which I've just mentioned above, they all have an ethical relation, they have ethical connection. So human security and ethics have a close relationship. The economic aspect, because economic justice is a concern of ethicists everywhere. Food aspect, because human sustenance, food for human sustenance is central to human existence. Health security, because healthcare that cannot take place effectively without the ethics or the ethical aspect. And then environmental ethics is a very important aspect, which has just been talked about by the previous speakers. At personal level, virtues are part of the ethical complex, or the ethical aspect. Community security. In Africa, we all know communitarianism is a very important aspect, and community survival is for the good of everyone. And finally, political security. We see that all these aspects of human security are related to ethics in one or the other. So let's start by looking at the economic security. The economic security in East Africa is defined by the China-East African trade imbalances. So apart from South Sudan, because South Sudan exports oil to China, all the East African member states have trade imbalances with China. So these are the figures. You can see they're really huge figures. That means that the Chinese, the side of China benefits more from this relationship. And many of these East African countries have trade imbalances, which are really huge, which they cannot overcome. And as a result, because of trade imbalances, the export or the imports of pharmaceuticals, healthcare products, and many other things that would help in the fight against COVID-19, they were affected because remember there was a disruption of the supply chain and many other things that took place during the COVID-19, and health was affected. So the economic aspect, because of the imbalances, ended up affecting the normal health supplies that are disrupted. For example, in Kenya, if you look at the countries, Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, Tanzania, the growth, although the concept of GDP has been raised here and question, but still most of our countries still use it as a measure of growth. So the countries in East Africa have lowered their expectations in terms of GDP. For example, in Kenya, up to 1%, we know at 1% from 5.7%. So this means that the trade imbalances in this region, in vis-a-vis the relationship with China, are really affecting the economic outlook of this region. There have been calls for Beijing to provide debt relief for the African partners. I tried to check of recent, there hasn't been any, I don't know what the progress of the talks, but nothing has happened as far as providing debt relief is concerned, because China now has a lot of, East African countries owe China a lot. So they don't seem to be, China doesn't seem to be in the mood to talk about these issues, but it's really would be a necessary issue because many of these East African countries have suffered economically. Then when you look at the health security, one of the issues that has been highlighted during this pandemic was the problem of importing substandard or low quality health materials or health products. Because of the outbreak, there was an increase in demand for PPEs, the personal protection equipment, and China was the easy access for East African countries to trade with. But the challenge was that the material that were brought were not really of good quality. This is one of the challenges that East African countries face. For example, in 2020 August, the Kenyan health minister publicly raised this issue and said that the protective equipment taken from China was of low quality. And this is because the East African countries are dependent. They are dependent on the imports, health equipment and pharmaceuticals and others from China. And it was found that some of the things that we were importing were not of good quality. So that is one of the ethic issues that has emerged during the pandemic. Unlike Western countries, which have hoarded COVID-19 vaccine probably until recently, China acted better. This is on a positive note. China acted better by donating some vaccines, although they were really small to have impact. There were few. And recently, I think this month, Xi Jinping has pledged that China will increase their vaccine availability to Africa to 1 billion doses. I think that is a welcome gesture. But the fear is that China was almost following the path of the Western countries, which were hoarding the vaccine. And this causes vaccine deprivation. And the Director General of the World Health Organization called it vaccine apartheid. So it's good that China has changed this. And I saw it just recently that Xi Jinping has pledged to increase vaccine to Africa. But before, most of these countries had hoarded the vaccines. And this had challenges, access to all these African countries. Then there's the issue of community security. The biggest regional challenge that these East African countries are dealing with during COVID-19 is cross-border infection, and this is mainly through truck drivers and all those that are crossing the borders. These are the ones that really spread the virus around the region. So there was pressure on these East African countries to keep the borders open for the truck drivers. Mind you, the people and other locals were not allowed to move, but the truck drivers who are bringing goods coming from China could move back and forth. And this we are going to look at it later, but it's one of the things that has caused the spread of the virus, because there was a lot of economic and political pressure on the East African countries to keep the goods moving. So the trucks and other goods were allowed to move. And these truck drivers and people who work on these trucks are the ones actually who mainly spread the virus. But also on this positive side, China has invested a lot in development projects in the region, including airports, roads, the standard railways, and other issues that are doing development. So it's good that China has invested in this infrastructure, but it also has given China a lot of leverage over this country, such that they force the countries to allow movement of goods around the region. There was a case in Kenya, for example, when the flights from China kept coming in, despite the fact that other countries were not allowed to travel into Kenya, but they were still coming in. And many of the people who came in were found to have to be positive with the virus. So this one, I think, that caused insecurity, community insecurity, and affected this East African region. Then, partly due to the desire to maintain trade, workers, they were allowed to move around in border region, cross borders, and all this. And as I said earlier on, it resulted in a lot of infections around the region. Then political security. There's reports of increasing violation of human rights. All of us have been seeing them in the media during the COVID-19 lockdowns and curfews. A lot of government agencies, especially security agencies, used a lot of force to enforce these curfews and lockdowns, but resulted in a lot of human rights abuses and deprivation of freedoms of the citizens. And many scholars have argued that China has not come out to say anything about these excesses or to condemn them. In actual sense, China has more and more political resemblance with the East African countries and how they have been enforcing these lockdowns and curfews. And as we know, recently there have been a lot of increase in political collaboration. For example, by 2002, the Chinese Communist Party had established close ties with the ruling parties in all these East African countries: Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Kenya, Djibouti, Madagascar, and others. They have constant trainings, visit to China and training and all this. The interest of China in this region seemed to be more on political security of the ruling parties rather than the political security of the citizens and other political actors in the region. So this is
2 minutes left. Okay.
Okay. So food security, as we said earlier on, there was a lot of lockdowns, and this affected distribution channels for in the region, and many people could not access food and all this around the region. So I propose a framework, a scheme that can help in building a better ethical relation between China and the region, which promotes a viable ethical fabric, realizing development sustainability, especially when we talk about the issue of health. So sustaining this Sino-East African relations within the global ethical framework requires a strong ethics foundation. And this ethics foundation has to come from the citizen institutions that are involved, the actors in these relations, the institutions that are involved that have been put in place, as we talked about the forums that China has put in place, and the banking sector that's involved and the business communities, and all these people involved in the relationships have to have a strong moral and ethical foundation on which this relationship can be built. So I'm not going to go any further than that, and I would like to stop there and welcome comments and other observations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dixon, for a most interesting presentation of different aspects of the relation between Africa and China. I think we will go on immediately to our next presenter, and then we have time for questions to both of you. Okay, so this means that our next speaker is Chung-Hui Ma. Chung-Hui Ma, is that something similar to how you would pronounce your name? Good, hope so. You are working at the Center for Bioethics, School of Medicine in China, in Xiamen University. And perhaps you will say some more words about your background. And the title of your speech is Ethical Reflections on the QR Code Dilemma of the Elderly During the Pandemic in China. So, I give you the word. Thank you. So you will unmute, please. Right, good.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Goring. Also, I would like to thank Professor Xiongbin Zheng and also Professor Tobian for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here online and to meet everybody. I'm going to talk about the QR code dilemma and elder people in China. It's quite it's a small topic, very concrete. Can you see my screen?
I see the text, yes.
Yes. I must apologize because I'm still on maternity leave. I just had my baby girl 2 months ago. So
congratulations.
Thank you. I couldn't find time to do it into PowerPoint, but I think the text would suffice. And it's a joint work between me and my colleague from the Department of Philosophy. Oh, sorry, I should introduce myself first. My name is Yung-Hui Ma. I'm from the Xiamen University. I had a clinical medicine background, and I'm doing bioethics for my postgraduate and PhD, which I studied in the University of Manchester in the UK. And I joined the Xiamen University since 2014, and now I'm teaching and bioethics for the medical and nursing, dental students in my school, and also I'm doing research. And I have a general interest on global ethics, bioethics, genetic ethics, and cross-culture ethics. QR code is a two-dimensional tool consisting of black squares arranged in a certain pattern on a white square grid. Is typically used for storing URLs or other types of digital data, which can then be read and retrieved by an imaging device such as a smartphone camera. It was first invented by a policeman from Hangzhou, and soon this becomes very prevalent, very popular in Hangzhou. Hangzhou was able to introduce a dynamic colored pandemic management system featuring green, yellow, and red health code. Under this system, access to any public places, including residential areas, restaurants, as well as public transportation such as subways and buses, are only allowed after the scanning of the health code. Individuals with green codes shall be given a pass, while those with yellow or red codes shall be required to follow the COVID-19 health and safety regulations set by the authorities, and they cannot freely move to the places. Health code started to spread across every other cities in China. At present, the health code system has been fully implemented in 31 provinces of China, with a total of nearly 900 million registrations and more than 40 billion times of application. From accelerating the resumption of work, production, study, and trade, to significantly minimizing the contradiction between economic development and COVID-19 management, the implementation of this game-changing system has brought China's pandemic prevention and control up to a whole new level in terms of both efficiency and accuracy. But at the same time, however, a QR code dilemma has arisen among the elderly during the nationwide application of this technology. I'm giving you a very specific example. On the July 28th last year, a senior was about to enter a subway station in Dalian city of Liaoning province, China, when he was requested to provide his health code. As he had no knowledge of this technology, a serious conflict subsequently erupted between the staff on duty and him, who insisted on entering the station without a green code. A video clip of this incident eventually went viral on Chinese social media, triggering a heated debate. The General Office of the State Council of China soon, on November, has issued the implementation plan on effectively solving the difficulties of the elderly using smart technology, calls for better digital services for the elderly in terms of transportation, consumption, entertainment, medical and administrative services. It also pledged to establish a long-term mechanism that will address the digital divide issue of the elderly in China by 2022. As a matter of fact, the digital divide of the aged population had existed long before the pandemic, but has since become much more significant. Unfortunately, this divide is expected to widen even more in the post-pandemic era, as digital technology advances more rapidly every day, making it a crucial topic in the elderly care ethics at home and abroad. So this paper intends to make ethical reflection on the QR code dilemma, and also we would like to propose the ethical comparative, 3 ethical principles, and we think it must be underpin this management system. According to China's 7th national census in 2020, the country is home to 264 million people over the age of 60, with 190 million of them aged 65 and above. Based on the latest report by the China Internet Network Information Center, the number of Internet users in China had reached 1 billion by the end of June this year, among which are as many as more than 1 billion of the smartphone online surfers. Since the majority of senior citizens either do not own any smart devices to scan the QR codes, or are only familiar with the very basic functions of smartphones, such as making and receiving calls, as well as chatting on the WeChat. WeChat is a very popular applications for connection. They are not equipped with the knowledge of scanning or generating these codes. Moreover, all users are required to go through the same verification process of login and facial recognition time and time again in order to ensure that their health codes stay updated. There is no doubt that the aforementioned activities surrounding health codes or even the QR codes pose a great challenge to the daily lives of elderly people. Now I'm giving you the full aspect, the challenges faced by elderly people. The first one is the QR code dilemma in shopping. The application of QR code technology is highly associated with the widespread use of smartphones. In recent years, the number of smartphone users in China has shot up to a 68% penetration rate. This phenomenon has greatly promoted the development of online payment platforms, making it the preferred payment method for most shoppers. According to a survey conducted by the People's Bank of China last year, 83% of the respondents said that they usually carried less than 500 RMB in cash, which is about 60 to 70 American dollars. While more than 70% mentioned that they were used to cashless payment methods. In addition to that, strict pandemic measures have further expanded the usage of online payment. During the most critical phase of COVID-19, health code must be provided via WeChat before entering any shopping malls, supermarkets, or restaurants. At the same time, there was also a rapid increase in the proportion of online transactions via the WeChat Pay. It's very similar like Alipay or PayPal, especially in the food and beverage industry, as well as the retail industry. We did a questionnaire survey on the use of smartphones by elderly over the age of 60. Out of 386 survey participants, only 218 of them owned smartphones, and even then, their use was solely limited to answering and making phone calls, along with chatting on WeChat. When it came to their preferred payment method during shopping, less than 300 participants usually paid by cash, while only a few dozen chose Alipay or WeChat Pay. As for the ability of shopping online and using health codes, as many as 345 senior citizens did not know how to purchase tickets online. 310 had no knowledge of online shopping, and 205 were incapable of using health codes. However, only once electronic payment method become an essential part of daily life, the difficulties faced by this empty nest elderly would be insurmountable. And empty nest elderly refers to those people that their adult children go to bigger cities to make a living, and they are left over in rural areas and living alone. On top of that, some regions and enterprises are actually trying hard to push forward with the concept of building a cashless societies. These modern practices are literally excluding the aged population who are unfamiliar with the mobile payment from enjoying a simple life of comfort. The second aspect is in medical services. We know that older adults, they are generally physically weaker than their younger counterparts. They tend to visit the doctor more frequently than before. However, the widespread use of online booking system in major hospitals unknowingly hindered them, who are especially in need of medical care. In the questionnaire survey we did, only 18 out of 386 seniors were able to make an online medical appointment by themselves. Most of the participants either choose to book in person or have their children do it on behalf of them, with some even deciding to just stay at home rather than going to the hospital. Then when the COVID-19 came, which further exacerbated this issue, as patients were strongly advised to schedule their appointments online prior to their actual visit to the hospitals. in order to avoid unnecessary overcrowding. The third aspect is in the transportation. The nationwide use of QR code technology makes it rather convenient for almost everyone to travel except for the elderly. Seeing how young people manage to unlock shared bikes. In China, we have a lot of shared bikes because in recent years the shared economy is very popular in China. So the young people can just use their mobile phones and to unlock the shared bikes, which is very convenient to travel within the cities. Older people might wonder if these devices were indeed the new master key for everything, watching how the young ones could get a ride almost whenever they want via e-hailing applications. The older ones could not figure out why they somehow were unable to do that. These days, drivers could even pay off their parking fees by staying behind the wheels, since certain parking lots have built-in recognition systems that could identify each license plate and charge them accordingly. Also, booking train tickets online might be one of the easiest things for youngsters to do, and yet purchasing tickets offline may be the only option for elderly who are strangers to smart devices. Of course, they would come to realize that getting tickets in person is becoming much harder than before, just because most tickets had been sold out online. The fourth aspect in leisure activities. With the continuous improvement of people's overall living standard, tourism has become a favorite pastime for the elderly after retirement. In comparison with the young people, they certainly have more time and energy to travel. However, the application of QR code technology in the field of tourism also brought about new problems to the elderly leisure activities. Some popular scenic spots have since implemented online reservation and booking system, reducing the enthusiasm of the elderly from visiting those places. During the pandemic, the available areas where the elderly could relax themselves were significantly reduced, as many parks and museums required health code to be shown at the entrance. Now I'm going to introduce with the moral principles that we think it could be executed to deal with the QR code dilemma of the elderly. How do we ensure that the implementation of QR code technology could be done in a way that is not only conducive to the COVID-19 prevention and control, but also inclusive of the elderly who were marginalized by this very technology? We are going to put forward 3 moral principles: benevolence, justice, and non-maleficence, with the belief that a humanized management based on these 3 moral principles is a key to overcoming this conundrum. The first one is the principle of benevolence. Benevolence is one of the most essential moral principles of Confucianism. We know that Confucianism is still very prevalent in the East Asian societies. Originating from blood ties, benevolence is a kind of love between people. This kind of moral sentiments amongst the people is then promoted to become a universal care for all living things. In this sense, the essence of benevolence transcends the innate love of nature blood and evolves into a morality of universal significance. Benevolence is also consistent with Western ethics of care by encouraging support and dedication to the recipient of care. Senior citizens are at most times helpless in this digital age and should thus be rightly cared for, so that this technology could in turn create opportunities for them and bring about positive impact on their daily lives instead.
2 minutes.
Or okay. All right, I need to skip. In light of these very trials and the tribulations existing within their lives, the care and concern of all people in society is the first step in overcoming this elderly challenge. With the exposure of the incidents involving the man being blocked from entering a subway station, many citizens expressed sympathy for them and thought that the staff should have been more patient, while others pointed out that we should set up alternative entrance methods. Okay, the second is the digital fanbu. Digital fanbu, also known as digital reverse mentoring, is an indispensable part of an inclusive digital society. Digital fanbu is a process whereby digital natives like children or youngsters pass on their digital experience and skill to their parents or elders. The second principle is justice. It is only right to include and adhere to this principle in the research and application of digital technology. Digitalization of the contemporary society is intertwined with the aging, so protecting the elderly from being marginalized in the advancement of digital technology is the latest ethical issue of justice that require urgent solution. The third principle of non-maleficence, okay. Internet, it refers to internet fraud in China is quite rampant in some of the regions. Older people often become the primary target for scams, cyber attacks, and fraud. The aged population are particularly vulnerable in a digital society and definitely prone to cyber fraud, because they have little understanding of the increasing complexity of the digital environment. Okay, I think I just wrap up. The COVID-19 pandemic has unveiled and threw a spotlight on deep-rooted inequalities across different societies, from the most advanced economies to the least developed ones. Under this unprecedented period of time, existing social technical discrepancies are often magnified, and diverse forms of exclusion, marginalization, and vulnerabilities emerge, with some more visible than others. The QR code dilemma facing the elderly during the pandemic is a prominent demonstration of the digital divide that exists among them. This particular issue has affected their daily lives in terms of shopping, medical services, etc., guided by the three moral principles of benevolence, justice, and non-maleficence. The implementation of QR code technology in the pandemic prevention and control policy should be executed in a more humane manner so as to safeguard the elderly from being marginalized throughout our battle against the COVID-19. Okay, I think, sorry, I'm not sure if I exceed this. I used some more minutes, but I think I should stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. And I must say that when I went to China, the first time was invited by Li Mausen, who was also present here, and he invited me to an ICT ethics conference, and so your speech was reminding me of this nice visit to Beijing. More than
you are more than welcome to visit again.
Thank you. More than 20 years ago. Thank you. These two presentations are a little different, although ethics has to do with relationship, and your presentation now was about the relationship between sort of state and authorities and the elderly and the gaps here. And Dixon Kanakulia's presentation was about the relationship between on the international level, China's influence in Africa. So now we have about, let's see how long time. Perhaps we should shorten the discussion a little, but I think we should have the open floor for questions now for you two presenters. I have a first question to Dixon. You tried to develop some ideas about the ethical relationship between China now presently and the Southeast African countries. My question is if you compare it to the colonial relations that you are very aware of from hundreds of years of colonialism, can you say something about how you can compare these relationships?
Thank you, Dr. Yoran. I wasn't comparing, but I was raising a caution because China's recently come back with Africa with strength, and the challenge is that it may be more expedient, it may be attractive to use those relations or historical systems that were there. And that's what we're worried about, that maybe it could affect the good relation that China has had with Africa. On the whole, the Chinese-African relationship has been really warm and respectful, but increasingly it is becoming almost using the same parameters like the Europeans and the former colonial masters that were here. And that's why there's need for us to try to avoid that, such that it remains mutually respectful. So maybe in relation to health, as I was mentioning, historically, the colonial masters didn't come to these countries to really benefit the colonies, but simply to exploit. So the health systems that were put in place were mainly to benefit the workers that had come from Europe and elsewhere to work for the colonial system. So when you go outside the main cities or the port cities, inside, there were no hospitals, there were no supplies, no connections. So the health was really not catered for that much by the colonial masters. Likewise, because these colonial powers really were interested in trade and exploitation, we see similar tendency coming up of late. Traditionally, it hasn't been like that with China, but of late has started. The focus is on developing infrastructure that benefits the trade and many other things. And China is reluctant to discuss debt relief, even in the midst of a very bad pandemic and all this. So that's what I was trying to caution, saying that China shouldn't go the way of the former colonial masters in Africa, who were mainly just aiming at exploitation. China has a favorable perspective in Africa. Africans are favorable towards China in regards to the relationship that we have. However, the pandemic, although now there's effort to try to reverse that, the pandemic had showed that China was also closing in herself and forgetting other countries, and just like it was happening in the US, but now it has started changing. I don't know whether that comment can suffice.
It does, certainly. Yes. Anyone who wants to raise a question can now raise your hand or write on the chat. So I don't see any raised hands so far, but I want to ask Yuma one question on the digital divide that you address in your interesting speech about the elderly. This is something we recognize, I think, from also all over the world, probably. But is it only the elderly, or is it also other groups that are come outside of the society, so to say, because of this increasingly dependency on ICT technology? You mentioned the elderly, but my question is there also other kinds of divide in the Chinese society?
I'm sure there must be other subpopulations such as the disability groups and the younger people. But I think the elderly, the group of elderly might be very prominent. And also they are the population in China. Most of them, they are retired. They have money and they want to travel. They want to spend their leisure time to go out and to visit other places. And so I think they are the ones most vulnerable in the digital age, especially in a society where the smartphones and also the ICT technologies are preferred and being implemented into practice. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially during the breaks, the case breaks, for example, in the city in where I live, I'm living in the southeast part of China. It's very close to Taiwan. We only have the Taiwan Strait in between Xiamen and Taiwan. That you go to supermarkets, restaurants, and almost everywhere that you need to show that you have a green QR code. Otherwise, you would be in a big trouble.
Okay.
So Yoran, can I ask Ma maybe a question? Or
Yes,
something?
yes, please.
Yes, sure.
I'm interested to find out this QR code, how it is developed. You talked about the person who invented it. I want to know whether there's an ethical thinking that goes within it, like when they're designing this, because I think the principles you're suggesting would be incorporated, not so. So I think what's the process of designing these codes and applying them? Is there room for ethical thinking in that?
I think when it was invented, there is a rationale behind is that it's very efficient for movement, for the control of the motion, and also for contact tracing. And so it's a very useful applications to assist the measures, the public health measures in this pandemic, during the pandemic.
Do they have ethicists involved in the planning and generating it, or?
When it was invented, it is very utilitarian thinking, because it's very useful, and it can easily track the people that the places he has visited. So, for example, if you have been to the places where there is a positive COVID-19 positive case, that for the past 2 weeks, that your QR code would become yellow or red. So, which means that you have traveled to those places, means that you are labeled like a little bit dangerous, and you need to be self-quarantine or isolated, or you need to get treated.
Okay.
Thank you. Now we have one more question. Giuseppe has raised his hand. Please. We can't hear you. Microphone? Can you unmute your microphone? We don't hear you.
Sorry, yeah. Do you hear me?
Yes, now.
Okay. I saw the 3 moral principles that you suggested to solve these problems, and one was benevolence, and I would like to know, probably I didn't understand well, but benevolence seems something like static. Why not care or comprehension as moral principles, because you are using something more related to your culture, or if we are giving to benevolence the same meaning. I don't know if it was clear from.
Because the benevolence is rooted in the Chinese culture, especially the philosophical tradition in Confucianism. It's a Chinese translation is 仁爱. So people are more familiar and more like to be. It's much more acceptable in China. When you talk about the benevolence with the policymakers, with the health authorities, that we should care and we should support and help the elder people, it would be much more easily to be accepted and to be circulated like widely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a very good question.
Thank you. I think we have to end this discussion now, and so we can have a little break before we start the next session. We are a little behind schedule, but I think that's not a problem. We will start again at 12 o'clock sharp in our time, in 15 minutes, per se. So we have a 15-minute break. Then Torbjörn will take over the chairing. Do you have any information for us, Torbjörn, or?
Not really, other than that we have some difficulty in establishing our connection with Dr. Shi, who will be the first speaker after the intermission. But we are doing our best now to link up with him.
So otherwise, perhaps
Dr. Chern, we could reverse the order of the two speakers.
If that's necessary.
If Dr. Chern is here.
Yeah.
Yes, Tony is here.
Yeah.
Well, you are most welcome.
Yeah, I have been already here to listen to very wonderful speech from Dr.
Great.
Ma. Yeah.
Then I suggest, if you don't mind, Dr. Chern, that we decide to reverse the order, even if we can get Frank.
I don't mind. Yeah.
Excellent.
And now I would just want to say thanks to first Dixon for a very interesting presentation of the Chinese-African relationship, and then Chung Cui Ma for the interesting presentation of the global of the ICT gaps in China. Both were very contributing to our conference, I think. So thank you very much. Now we have 15 minutes break.
Shall we try to reconvene for the third session? I hope you all had time for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. Now we will have two presentations dealing with the pandemic. And at least the first one, I think, links up beautifully with the presentation that Professor Ma Yonghui just made. So it is my great pleasure to welcome Professor Frank Fuyuan Shi, that is Shi Fuyuan Jiaoshu, to our webinar. Professor Shi has a PhD degree from the Graduate Institute of Preventive Medicine at National Taiwan University. Today, he is also a practicing medical doctor working for the emergency department of the National Taiwan University. So it is, we are really very lucky that you can be with us, Professor Shi. Can you hear us? And can you then please unmute yourself? I should also add that you are not only a attending physician at the emergency department of National Taiwan University Hospital, but you are also the director of the Department of Quality Assurance and Infection Control at the Cancer Center branch at National Taiwan University Hospital. And you are a professor of the emergency department of this same university. And last but not least, you are the CEO of the Emergency Medical Response Training Center at the Department of Health in Taiwan. So without further ado, Professor Shi, I give the word to you. The title of your presentation is The Dilemma Between Public Health versus Individual Rights, confronting COVID-19 in Taiwan. Please. We cannot hear you. Could you hear me? Can there be a problem?
Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome. Oh, very good. Excellent.
Okay.
Welcome again.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my great honor to be here to share my some personal experience and some, as you know, I work in the emergency room for more than 30 years, and I experienced a lot of disasters, including the SARS in year 2003 and this year and last year. And today I would like to talking about something different from the medical field, but I would like to focus on the dilemma we met, especially between the public and the individual, for public good and the individual welfare when confronting COVID-19 in Taiwan. And I think there is a dreadful experience in hospital inner spread of SARS in year 2003. The hospital was a middle size in Taipei City, in the center of the Taipei City, about 400 beds. One day, it was found there was some SARS. At that time, is the new coronavirus spread within the hospital. So the hospital was forced to lock down, to isolate from for more than 2 weeks. A lot of patients and staffs, families are not allowed to go out. So there's a lot of panic within the hospital. Some patients commit suicide and a lot of psychological trauma at the time, because some of my colleagues working in the hospital, and finally my hospital, my emergency department was also shut down due to inner spread. So it was a very terrible experience at the time. And later it became a very social panic within the whole community, especially in Taipei City. In the left side, for patients with fever, and they cannot get into any hospital because there's a very strict isolation laws for them. But the epidemic lasted for 3 to 4 months, and it disappeared. We did not know why it disappeared spontaneously, but after that, till now, every year we have a very strict exercise and the evaluation of biohazard since year 2004. Every year, the CDC guys will came to some hospitals and watching, observing how they did. So the healthcare professionals get very well training after SARS. But the psychological trauma are still in every Taiwanese nightmare. For example, in the right side, you can see a photograph, and there's a wedding. It's in emergency room. There's a nurse and a doctor. They get married at the time. Every people, they have to wear face mask. So we keep the photos as a joke. But now we wear face mask for more than 2 years, and their children this year they get into the university. So it tells us it's 80 years past. And the left side is my quarantine document because I was announced I have to put in quarantine, and they announced the news in the television. So at a day, I get more than 100 telephones to telling me and try to persuade me I was safe or something, but they forget to give me meal. So I have to survive with my my storage in my house for more than 10 days. And then finally, I can go out and get my document. And so I keep it as a memory. This time, this year, just several days before the Chinese Lunar New Year, the most important holidays in traditional Taiwanese people. And we learned there's a new coronavirus epidemic in mainland China. So the memory showed up again, and we take procedures to prevent the spread in my country. So every emergency room, we set up fever clinic, and we set up many hand washing with alcohol or with waters, and everyone wear face mask, and we keep social distance. I think the compliance of the 3 non-pharmaceutical intervention is perfect this time. And I think it was the most important thing for Taiwan to keep in quite peace situation. And I took these 2 pictures just about 1 month after the epidemic in the world, about March in year 2020. And I took the photos in the MRT, the mass transit in Taipei City. You can see everyone in the train, they wear face mask, and no one talking to each other because we are discouraged to communicate, to talk. And on the right side, you can see there's a classroom, and we set up a temporary hand washing equipment in every classroom to help washing our hands. So it was a very quite successful procedures, and the social distancing everywhere, and the screening in every entry. Every buildings in front of the door, we use an infrared camera to check in for everyone's body temperature for every entry, not just hospitals, some public buildings, department store, they also set up such kind of equipment. And within the elevators, talking in the elevators is banned. So we cannot talking to others within the elevators. And many seats are forbidden to sit because for social distancing. So for example, you can see there's 12 seats there, but just only you can sit 6 of them. So it was very, very completely apply the social distancing rule. And we had a very widespread use of contact tracing. So everyone, when we get on the bus or get into a convenience store, we have to took the QR code to identify myself, and have when we leave, and we check out. So in theory, the government know who get into which building, which stores, but it results in quite serious witch hunting. And now the government side, because the government, I think this time they got lessons from the SARS in year 2003, but at the time there's no social media. But this time we have a lot of social media, so people talking a lot, taking pictures, and they say who in the MRT they did not wear face mask, or who in the restaurant they took off the face mask, and they showed up in the Facebook or others, and you transmit to others, and showed up in the televisions or newspapers. So the witch hunting is quite common, and I think it helps in prevent the spread of the virus, but also result in very serious insult for personal privacy. Here I show a very simple example. For example, there's people came from the South American, get into Taiwan, and he got COVID-19 with Delta strain, and his contact history was exposed, and people talking in the televisions, in the talk show, and in newspaper, and in the government communications. So who know who contacts others in what situation, when and where, and their CT number of their virus title, something. I think even the doctors did not know so much, but in Taiwan, everyone knows that and talking about that. I think if you are one of them, you will feel very awkward and very uncomfortable. And in Taiwan, because it was dense populated, especially in the urban, for example, Taipei or Taichung, Kaohsiung, Tainan, the places are very crowded, and we have a lot of interesting market and the night market. I took these pictures just 2 weeks before COVID-19 because it was in the beginning of the winter vacation. So I bring my daughters to my hometown in Tainan and enjoy good meals in night market. There are a lot of people there, and in the right side, the MRT nearby by hospital. During the traffic jams period, a lot of people there, but 2 weeks later, there's not anyone. For example, I showed in the left side, because in May, we have a spread of COVID-19. So the people are scared. In the left side, I show the shops in Taipei main station. You cannot see anyone. I was the only traveler there because I have to take the MRT to another place. All the shops were forced to close, and at least for 2 months. And in the right side, you can see there's a quite famous flower market in Taipei City. it opened from Saturday to Sunday, but you can see there's almost no people. It was closed for at least 3 months, but in September it was reopened, but just only several stands and very few people. So in the 3 or 4 months, for many people, and their livings get hurt. But the growth economy in Taiwan is quite good, and the GDP in Taiwan also very good, especially during epidemic, because the export in Taiwan is quite good, because the social security and the people health are also in good control. So the production power is also preserved. So on the export is very good. So we have a full sense of the good economy, and the stock market in Taiwan goes higher, and sometimes get the highest in history. So for the society, for the health part, people are in danger, but in economy, it was very good. And I think it was very confusion. But for different business, they are inside a great deal. For example, the overall money loss is a little bit, but for the transportation and for our personal services, including touring, restaurant, lodging, hotels, something, they lost a lot of money, and sometimes even more than 50%. But for other business, it's quite good. For the government, for example, myself, as a governmental employee and emergency room doctor, I think this period is the best time in my history, because one day just only several patients. Most of the patients, they cannot get into the emergency room because there are a lot of restrictions. We have to do PCR and very strict screening. So people, they seeking medical care by personal, or they go to pharmacy to buy drugs or something, but they are afraid to get to hospital because they are afraid they will get infection in hospital. So the workers in different business, here's the statistics in year 2019, just the year before the COVID-19. The government estimated the other business is okay, but for the personal, individual reseller, transportation, and storage, and the hotel, restaurant, and they are almost estimated about 3 million of people in Taiwan, and the rate they will suffer 20% of GDP loss, and most of the GDP loss was putting on the 20% of employee. So I think the economy grossly is okay, but for some families, they got terribly hurt, and we did not know that, because grossly we think everything is okay, everything is under control, and the government use a lot of money for social welfare, but some people, they are not covered by that. For example,
Dr. Shi, I hate to intervene, but I must remind you that we are short of time. So can you try to finish within a couple of minutes, please?
Okay. And some people, they cannot work from home. The labor force cannot work from home. For example, they cannot repair from their home and they use robots to take care of them. And the go fishing, you have to doing that directly. And the last thing, I think the witch hunting everywhere. For example, the left side, you can see the exports of Ministry of Health. He took off his face mask in MRT. Some people take pictures and talking on the newspapers. And the currently Secretary of Ministry of Health, they begging people not witch hunting. And the main regulations were for social media rather than virus itself. For example, a resident, we have to protect of yourself. We use a lot of shield, and everyone have to check is that 1.5 meters away from each other. And then finally, I think we are on the crossroad of human development. We try to have prosperity, freedom, convenience, and the privacy, or the social security, collectivism, restrictions, and the surveillance. I think we have to balance between them. The hundreds years ago, Taiwan suffered from a series of epidemic, and the only thing we can do is pray to the God, wish the God to help us. But through COVID-19, we learned a lot, and I think we have to think about how to balance between the public health and the individual rights and the welfares. And I think in Chinese word, we have a quote, the more amendments, the more he says is ignorance. I think we have to humble and to be humble and learn from the COVID-19. Thank you for your attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shi, for your highly engaging, not to say moving presentation, which I really think invites comparison with other places. Myself being Swedish and sitting here in Stockholm listening to you, of course, my first reflection is that you have been so much more successful than we have in adopting effective, efficient, successful measures to prevent the spread of the pandemic. And it's an important task, I think, for us to learn from you, to try to see why it is that you have been so much more successful. Perhaps there are many factors involved, and I thought of this when you started talking about your experience of the SARS epidemic. Do you think that the SARS, may I ask this question at once, do you think that the SARS epidemic played a rather decisive role in the way that you have dealt with the COVID-19 virus?
I think the SARS help us a lot, but something we did not learn from SARS, I think we did not do a good job. For example, during SARS, we did not have vaccine. So this time, I think the vaccine is quite slow, and the arrangement is not quite good. But for quarantine, for isolation, and for screening, and I think not just the healthcare professionals, but also the civilian people, the government, they all learn from SARS. So I think SARS is a very good teachers for us confronting COVID-19.
Thank you. This is so interesting, but we are running out of time, so I'm afraid we have to proceed to our final speaker for today, and that is Professor Xiuxi Chen Xiuxi Jiaoshou in Taipei. Professor Chen is a distinguished professor at the Institute of Epidemiology and Preventive Medicine at the College of Public Health of National Taiwan University. Dr. Chen has his doctoral degree from Cambridge University, and I understand that you have also served as a distinguished professor at the Academy of Finland during a couple of years, but more than 10 years ago. It's so nice that you could take time off to join us, Dr. Chen. So now I invite you to make your presentation, the theme of which is COVID-19 pandemic for revelation of health humanities. Please, Dr. Chen. Can you hear us? We can see your screen, Tony, but we cannot hear your voice.
Can you hear me? No. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was muted. Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Lovely.
Okay.
Tony.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. Thank you so much for invitation. Yeah. I think today I would like to share my experience in health humility related to the COVID-19 pandemic. First of all, I would like to be thankful for again the Louis and also Bin Zhenchen to bring me to this branch of the humanities. And you can see how important it is we learn from COVID-19. And I have to say, the health humility right now cannot be overemphasized, So I would like to, present the three part about the about these lectures, and to see how the pandemicals, between virus and human, and how the COVID-19 affect the health humility, and also bring up the ethical about, people always think we are supposed to go to the digital enabled healthcare, but that would bring the issues about health ethical code as well. So first of all, you understand very well, virus change from time to time, from the original type until so far we are faced with Omicron, and human, in order to respond to this the evolution of the virus, we are actually reacting with different content measurement, including the different kind of the MPI procedure, which affect the human activity, of course, and also the overall the vaccination is another sense to ease this MPI. So before the Omicrons, it seems the world has started to think about we have a coverage rate of the vaccination, but the MPI sense can be relaxed. So you see that MPI has go down, since October. But unfortunately, you can see they come back again about the border control and also some of lockdown. in order to in response to Omicron. So that's very interesting to think about. I want to, present the 4 principles about ethical consideration that we always, learn from the COVID-19, how to improve our ethical, code, to take care between the collective, behavior and also the individual liberties. So you see, the harm principles say, we need to have a protection of public from harms, because we have, we need to have some, the MPI, for examples. But in the same time, we always learn from time to time to improve how to balance, individual liberties, to take the least, the restriction measures in order not to affect so many the peoples who want liberties. And of course, reciprocity principles is also very important to provide for those who in need of the to be cared during the COVID-19 because they have a disproportionate burdens. And of course, the COVID-19, during so many, occasions like the contact tracing and there's the privacy principle, and also you can see the vaccination and the testing, and so the private information. How can we cope with this ethical code? So the whole, the whole world always around these 4 principles to see how can we, reach the goal about this. So I give you the examples about the important things about quarantine and isolations. And in the whole day, you can see this is Italy, the Italy ward. The old people, use the 40 days, to quarantine the people's infected with the plague, before, embarking. So nowadays we improve from time to time because of civilization and also our technology development in the health, but we still need to face with the quarantine, And Dr. Si just mentioned about, we also learn from the SARS. And in Taiwan, we are accustomed to wear the facial mask since the 2003, and that's become, the very good the example of debate between the collective and the individual consciousness of the human behavior. So in terms of public health, you can see it's very clear what is the goal of the implementing these the MPI procedures. Are they effective? And what are the known potential burdens? Can the burden minimize? Are there alternative? Is the program fail implemented? So the final sense is how to balance between the benefit and the burdens become, our ethical framework. So let me give you a practice about the quarantine. I mean, in Taiwan, Dr. Si just mentioned about. So in Taiwan, in order to be very successful for the contact tracings, the government and also the decision maker use all the means, including the geopolitics, including the CCTV, to monitor the people who are suspected of being, infected when contact the people, already have the COVID-19. So this is called the community-wide contact tracing in order to provide protection of public from harm, not to cause the community-acquired outbreak. But time by time, the government and also our people, including me, we are thinking about how can we apply our ethical core principle in terms of the proportionality by using this restrictive means during the quarantine isolations. And this is exactly the human development by using the AI, the digital, contact tracing, to classify the different kind of the contacts. For example, you can have the hospital isolation and quarantine until the home quarantine isolation, and also there's no need for quarantine at home, but just keep the social distancing, or you don't need any social distance. So this is actually the contribution learned from the humanity by using the proportionality principles. And the proportional principle also apply to the border controls. I always, communicate with the government decision maker and all the stakeholders to see, we have to think about how to use evidence-based to classify the different people from different risk with the different, the quarantine days, from the 14 days until 17 until 5 days, by using the evidence base, And also the government also learn from how can we provide, the service who are disproportionate, burdens, and how can we provide the aid, including food, including, the warm support, social support, anything to reduce the psychological harm. And you can also see, the AI or the people are very clever to think about how to provide, such kind of leisure activity when they quarantine at home. This is so clever, and this is under the reciprocity of the principle, to do that. And of course, we also improve day by day, time by time, although we still need time to adapt. But you can see the AI and also the digital, technical already provide the contact tracing with the protection of the privacies by using the different technicals. So the left side you see have the low privacy. The right side you can see they have a decentralized, the GPAs can provide, the data protection. So I think this is the fourth part I want to share with you. But we never, we never think this is all ends. We have to, make all effort to reach, such kind of the goal. The second thing I want to give you a very brief about the framework. I mean, the COVID-19 for me, the race not only affect health, raise the issue about the so-called, resident, the so-called the influence on the low socio-economic status and resulting in the health disparity, including the uneven distributed vaccine and the testing and also surveillance, and also in quality medical care, and all these affect the all aspect of our life. So I think one of the things is racial disparity is a typical examples. So you can see this is one classical example of the people living in the indigenous people living in the Amazon rivers. I mean, they already have vulnerable to health, and they have also limited the medical resources, and they are, they represent as one of the marginal populations. The other thing is COVID-19 in the USA. You can see they have a different death rate and the risk for different racial group, and also, of course, we have to pay attention to not only for those people, but also for different kind of marginal peoples, from the elderly, the particular woman, with more burdens when everyone stay at home, and also other marginal population already been discussed, before the COVID-19, including HIV and AIDS and so on. So I think the whole world are faced with the health disparities, and COVID-19 probably even wide such kind of the gap. So from the life expectancy, you can also see we already have the health disparity between the two different kind of people. For example, we have the same GDP between the Nigerian and also Vietnam peoples, but the lifestyle is different. So the COVID-19, you know, wasn't such kind of disparity or not. So I think this is the second part. I think I would, you know, give you about, you know, the the impression of how COVID-19, whether COVID-19, you know, why or how can we, you know, solve this problem. Finally, COVID-19, people always talk about they bring the promise of the, if you look on the bright side of the AI, you can see they have created so many AI, the technical, from digital, from AI machine learning, from IoT, from robot, and also provided the blockchain platform. But how such a digital enabled care models cause the problem? I mean, of course. So we need to consider so many, you know, issues. I already mentioned about the four consideration extending to, you know, the detailed items. I would not, you know, mention here, but you can see the principle, the ethical principle code, you know, need to be taken care of as well. I mean, for example, you know, right now we have the impact body test and the vaccination. How can we provide the certification for protection of the public harm, but also we can take care of the the proportionality and also the data privacy by using the blockchain technicals. And how about the border control when using the immunity passports? Are you happy with that? And what is the philosophy of the ethical code behind the sins, and how can we, you know, make these sins, you know, justify in terms of the ethical principles? Finally, I would to remind all of you, digital enabled care and has been created in COVID-19 and during and after the errors. But you see, they also, you know, bring up the several disparity in terms of the inequality and discriminations, not only in the accessibility, but also in the application, in the sample, you know, data bias, and in the long denial of the AI. Such of the kinds have to be very careful about when they apply, you know, to become the digital health in the futures. So I will finish my slide, you know, my talk very soon. The final things I want to share with all of you about what does the Omicron right now tell us, because we live in now, not living in the tomorrows. So we always say we are safe unless everyone is safe. But you can see, you know, the vaccination rate is not uneven distributed around the world. So this is not going to be true about the world I just mentioned. So we have to make every effort to reach. I mean, the WHO already proposed the Sustainable Development Goal from the poverty until the partnership. The important thing is the 17th goal of the partnership. And that's very important because we are in the same boat. We are in a global village. So we need to think about, and the important things, you know, people should understand, you know, all of things I already mentioned before in this talk. And thank you so much for your invitation, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Professor Chun, very much for your extremely interesting presentation. It's interesting to listen to, and you also raise so many questions for us to go back to and think about. This is really very interesting. According to our schedule, we were supposed to close now at 1:45, and we must close very soon, I'm afraid. But we could have 2 or 3 short questions before we end. Is there anyone who would like to say something? Of course, we will reconvene tomorrow and we will have a general discussion towards the end of tomorrow. So there will be some time.
Well, may I ask a question for
Yes, please.
both
Please.
of the presenters? It was very interesting to hear your both perspectives, and they are really complementary. The discussion now focus very much on the ethical and political effects of COVID-19, both when it comes to justice, which was raised by the last speaker here, but could you comment perhaps on how these measures would impact on human rights? It's of course a very broad question, but there's a worry that especially authoritarian regimes can use this needed restriction in order to also prolong them for keeping these authoritarian measures also after the COVID. What would you say about this risks, and what can we do about them? Thank you.
I think that's a very good question. I think this is why I give these lectures, because when time goes by, it could be very irrational, or rational to think about what is the good and what is the right to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. In order to also to take care of the individual liberties. So I think we have to stick to some of the principle between the collective thinking and also individual the thinking, and try to use the effective means to cover both sides and to be justified for human beings, not only think one angle. This is my previous comment.
Thank you. With that answer, I think we must wind up today's discussions and presentations. We have had a chance to listen to 6 extremely interesting presentations that, to my mind, all deal with questions that face all mankind today, although these problems face us in somewhat different ways depending on where we are. Göran, do you have anything you would like to say before we close? Or has Göran left us already?
No, I have not. Sorry.
I'm just before we close. I wondered if you.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for the nice, very interesting presentations. So I have nothing to add.
And I repeat that. Thank you so much. And it's so fascinating to have people from China, from Taiwan, from there, and different countries in Europe at the same seminar. Yeah, thank you so much, and see you all tomorrow, I hope, for tomorrow's session, which will begin at 9:30 and last until 12:30. Thank you again so much, and goodbye. See you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.